Meeting Our Needs, the show about people and organizations who are meeting the needs of the Arlington community. I'm your host, Nathan Bynum. Today's episode focuses on the basic need to survive. We'll be learning about 3 organizations that help people to survive here in Arlington. I'm here with Charles Meng, Executive Director of Arlington Food Assistance Center, Geraldine Jones, Executive Director of Doorways for Women and Families, and Geraldine Shannon, Executive Director of Arlington Thrive. Welcome to the show, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for coming, and I wanted to start off with a basic question just about how does your organization help people in Arlington to survive? How does it help meet those basic needs? And we'll start with you, Jerry, and we'll work right on down the line to Charlie.
Sure. Arlington Thrive provides emergency financial assistance to residents who, due to some personal crisis, cannot pay bills for basic needs. We will pay for rent, utilities, medical and dental help, prescriptions, and sometimes work-related requirements, steel-toed shoes, a uniform. You know, if a uniform is only keeping a person from a job, we will pay for it so they can get to a job.
So just to keep people on their feet during really difficult times.
That's right. That's right. And frequently, this past year we prevented the eviction of over 600 households who had received eviction notices. Now, I know it is a process that gets complicated, but the cost of living in Arlington for renters is very high, and honestly, I don't know how most people do it living at low wages.
Wow. Well, thank you very much. And Geraldine.
Well, thank you. At Doorways, we provide a range of options for people's safety and survival. We have 2 emergency shelters that provide emergency shelter for people who are in imminent harm due to domestic violence, and we're the only domestic violence shelter here in the county. And we also have a shelter for families who are homeless for a variety of reasons, for when, unfortunately, they aren't able to get the help from Jerry's team or one of the other programs in the community to stave off eviction, or for some reason they suddenly lose their home. And survival is so much more than just shelter, Nathan, and I think as Doorways has been part of the community for 3.5 decades, we've really learned that the need for help goes far beyond emergency shelter. And we provide at Doorways next step housing programs. So we help over 50 families at a time live in apartments of their own here in Arlington and make that critical transition to real survival beyond the emergency, and provide financial counseling, child mental health, counseling, legal support, whatever it takes to help that family really be safe long-term and free of abuse. That's
great. Yeah, it's interesting when you start trying to get people to survive, you naturally want to help them thrive, you know? And I've seen some of the pictures on your website of people opening the door to their new home, and the magic comes right through the pictures. It's really amazing.
Pretty amazing, yeah. Thank you.
And Charlie?
Well, the Arlington Food Assistance Center provides supplemental groceries to Arlington residents who are going without food, who are in need. Last week, that totaled almost 1,850 families. In fact, the numbers have been going up radically since the middle of the summertime.
Wow.
So in one of the wealthiest counties in the United States, there are over 4,000 individuals who are food insecure.
Wow. Yeah, that's unconscionable, especially when you walk around in the neighborhoods and see the wealth that's here.
Exactly, but it's the folks who are between all of us. It's the folks who man the counters at fast food organizations, cashiers at grocery stores, housekeepers, commercial cleaners, and those kinds of things. They're people we deal with every day.
Right.
But even though they work hard, many of them have 2 jobs, they still cannot make ends meet in the Arlington community.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I hear these numbers, I'm hearing like 600 people that were going to be evicted, and your organization helped them. More than 1,000, I forget what you said, the exact number, but thousands of Arlingtonians that are struggling with food. And yes, we can't do our lives without people who we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So we need their survival for our own survival.
Absolutely.
Well, exactly. And these are very hard-working families. And unfortunately, companies or whomever pay them a minimum wage of $7.25 an hour. I think, Jerry, you could speak to the cost of living. Rent, with the average rent in Arlington, is $1,600. That would take an individual 44 hours a week at minimum wage just to pay the rent.
Right.
And if you increase that to a family, the average rent for a 2-bedroom is now standing at around $2,300 a month. Wow. So if you're a single parent trying to make that and cover the cost of childcare and keeping your kids, safe and healthy and cared for, it becomes quite impossible. And what we find is that that pathway out of homelessness and out of abuse is getting longer for a lot of families. And had it not, if it weren't for the safety net that's really represented along this panel, families would just constantly be rolling back into very deep crisis and living in very unsafe situations. It's shocking to me as an Arlingtonian and as a parent to hear what our families are living in prior to coming into our programs. And no one deserves to live in such fear and such abuse, and we have the tools to put a stop to that. And when we work collectively together as we do, it's pretty phenomenal. Families that are in apartments really building skills and learning how to be self-sufficient long-term are benefiting from the assistance of AFAC and being able to fill in their needs there with their groceries so that they can keep the rent paid. And when those unforeseen colds and challenges hit and their child needs amoxicillin, there's Thrive to help make sure they can get that medication without becoming homeless over something as simple as amoxicillin.
Right, and frequently just one emergency, one crisis without help can be a catastrophe for a family. Wow. If you are $100 short of your rent, your landlord may give you some leeway, but then you get into the late fees, so you're $130 late on your, I mean, it just, it can become a snowball and then a downward spiral. And so, given the current economy, our organizations are almost necessary just to keep thousands of households from falling off the cliff. And, most of our clients we only see once because of that one-time crisis. Otherwise, they're working hard, many jobs, just to keep it together, and barely keeping it together. The Urban Institute had a study a few months ago that said a Northern Virginia family of 4 needs an income of about $88,000 just to, and actually to do pretty well. I mean, in addition to the basics, be able to cover costs related to child care or other things related to children's activities.
And healthcare, I mean, you never know what kind of costs are going to come up with healthcare.
That's right. Or a dental accident. I mean, my husband and I have dental insurance, and even if we, but it doesn't do very well, most people do not have dental insurance.
Yeah, we see the majority of who we see at Doorways are children. Over 50% of our clients are kids, and so few of them have ever had a basic dental checkup. It's a luxury, and for many of us, we think of that as kind of that first base on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, of our health and our shelter and food, and that's really where it fits for many of us. But for them, it's so much higher up. And we see kids with pretty severe dental infections, and, at times it can become very dangerous for their overall health. And so having that resource really puts them on a much better place going forward.
Just the foundation of good health going forward into the rest of their lives when you're working with children. I mean, it makes a huge difference, their health as children, for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, and food also contributes to that.
Of course.
Good prenatal care is important to the development of children. Good, healthy food is important to their activities in school and their ability to concentrate on their studies. And that's one of the things that AFAC is trying to do, is to help children and families make better decisions about the kind of food they eat by providing more nutritious produce and vegetables.
And is there also education about nutrition that AFAC is involved with? Or is it just providing all these healthy things, and when you provide it, people choose it?
We got into that about 2 years ago because a lot of our families come from other countries. And we, at one time, got about 4,000 pounds of acorn squash in. Very nice stuff. But there are no winter squashes in Central America. So you hand people these things and they have no idea what to do with them.
Sure.
So yes, we started doing food demonstrations. And that has led to teaching occasions in our waiting room where we talk about things like the amount of sugar in meals, the amount of salt, and trying to get people focused on providing a healthy and nutritious diet for their families.
That's wonderful.
And that really spills over. A lot of the families that Charlie works with, Doorways is working with as well. So we really are wrapping around them collectively. And it's such a nice partnership because we have staff doing visits in clients' homes and are going to their apartments and doing their budget with them. And a lot of our families feel like, well, I can't afford to eat healthy. And it feels like it's an economic choice when in fact it's not. So we are kind of taking this really comprehensive, holistic approach saying, well, let's look through the numbers. Let's look through what you can afford and pair with some of the things at AFAC to help show you that these meals are really good for you and within your reach. Wow. So we see families, actually it's really cute. A lot of times our families, after they graduate and are doing well on their own, they'll show up at our office with food for the entire staff because they're so proud to make us a meal. And it's one of the most moving things. And you would, everybody comes running to the kitchen when you, but it's a really wonderful way to see where they've taken all of the things that they've learned across the way.
Wow.
Caroline, something Caroline said made me think of this. You know, Arlington is a small county. Here are 3 organizations, and we're not the only organizations that work with the poor and the struggling in Arlington, but we work together, and our services are complementary. And I think that's important because I've heard that from donors. You know, well, why is there this organization and why is there that organization and don't you duplicate? In fact, we each have a specialty, a niche, and we can focus on doing that well and work together. And I feel that that has even increased over the last few years with the 10-year plan to end homelessness and other efforts where we've been working together much more. And so that's just an important point to make.
Absolutely.
And, you know, I admire the work of my colleagues and their organizations. They're doing fabulous work. And, you know, I was also thinking of a client of Doorways who, as a result of domestic abuse, had some serious dental trauma. And as she was getting ready to kind of become independent, get a job, you know, she wasn't feeling good about the way she looked. And we helped pay for the dental work. And all of the assistance we provide requires a referral from a social worker or a caseworker. So we'll hear from Doorways, we'll hear from county social workers who are working with a client on some issue, but at the same time, maybe that client is worrying about how am I going to pay the electric bill? And so if we can help them pay the electric bill, then they can focus on the problem that the social worker is working on. So, you know, there's a nice cooperation among the organizations.
It comes through so strongly, like more so than I've experienced up to this point, that these 3 organizations work together so much. And it's reassuring to me, as someone who cares about people in my community, that there is kind of a net being formed between your organizations.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. And I always kind of, when people, I hear the duplication concern as well, and it would be such a luxury, to tell you quite honestly. I mean, it would be a luxury that we just do not see at all in terms of duplicating services. I think that the needs are just so great, and the things, like I said, are just so fundamental that people are without, you know, food and housing and medical care, and you know, that one little bill that's just out of their reach to keep them afloat. You know, it's just kind of humbling really, to work on the front lines with people who are really struggling to just survive. And that is something that I feel, and I've seen again and again and again in my work, that when we do that and when we really invest in people, they really do go a long, long way.
Absolutely.
And the client that Jerry's talking about, and so many more, we had a 19-year-old mom come into the safe house. She was fleeing abuse, and she had not finished her GED, and she had grown up in foster care, and her whole life had been people telling her she wasn't capable and she just couldn't achieve. And she really believed it. And she was, it took a while for her to decide not to go back to the abuse. And once she did, and we helped her get into her own apartment, and we continued supporting her for about 2 years and helped her get that GED. And she actually went to college, and she went to a job training program, and her son went on to be on the honor roll and really take off. And this was 6 years ago. And she called me this week to tell me that she just landed her dream job that she had been steadily working towards all this time. And
what's the dream job?
She's working in the medical profession in women's health care, full-time, with benefits, at a livable wage where she needs no assistance to sustain her family.
That's amazing. And she's helping other people to meet
and
that
helping
health
other
need
people
that
all the way.
was so tenuous for her for a lot of her life. Wow,
Right.
that's amazing.
So it's really amazing.
Yeah. I'm interested to hear personally how you got involved with the work that you're doing now. And if we could start with you, Charlie, and go down the line.
Right. I don't know where it really started. I've always had a sense of service. I started in higher education long ago. Went to the Kennedy Center for a while, did some consulting, and then ultimately got a job with the DC government, which was probably a very large mistake. And so
I think this is Arlington.
Exactly. I wouldn't have said that over in, well, I might have said it in DC.
That's okay.
But then I went out and I'm very handy, so I started a construction company for a few years and did a lot of volunteer work on the side over at Food and Friends in DC. And then I saw a job literally for the Director of Operations at AFAC, applied for it and got the job, and did that, and then 2 years later was made the Executive Director. You know, and I've had offices, very large offices, very big titles, very big salaries, but this is the job that is probably the best job I've ever had. I see the effect of my work on a day-to-day basis. I see the effect of the work of my staff and all of the volunteers that help us do what we do every day, and I see that changing people's lives for the better. And that's really a quite satisfying situation.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And Caroline.
Sure. I am a social worker by training and have spent my entire career of 25 years now, I think, working with vulnerable families. And but when I met Doorways, I was actually on a break and was a stay-at-home mom. And so I got asked by the former director to come and just do a little consulting and see if there was something that we could do a little bit better for the kids in the programs at Doorways.
Neat.
And
that you're a soccer player.
That too. But that was 11 years ago. Wow. And I started at Doorways as a consultant to try to build programming for the kids. And once I saw, as Charlie was saying, that impact and that real difference that I could make right here in my community, gradually and over time, I became more and more involved with the organization. And 3 years ago, moved, like Charlie, I moved through the organization, up the organization, and couldn't be more proud to lead it today. It's definitely a part of who I am.
Wonderful. It's in both of your cases, just the passion for the service led you to where you are now.
Very much.
That's amazing. Jerry.
I think graduating from college, I had considered social work or to be a psychologist, and I went in a different direction and actually had a career in governmental relations for research universities. And although I certainly felt I was representing good for our nation, I didn't see the direct result of that. And at some point when I left a job, this job opening was available, and I thought, you know, it's in my community. I'm hoping that it will, you know, give me that sense of really giving, being able to see the results of my work and to give back. And it has done that. And you know, I still feel great about it. And with the help of volunteers and a very good board, you know, we can continue to do the good work.
Wow. Yeah, that's wonderful. We've touched on, as you've been talking, I've been struck by you've brought up specific cases already, even without my asking. But I wanted to see if there's any more specific success stories that you could share with us. Obviously, keeping confidentiality, but sharing some of the specific successes that you've had as organizations and in your jobs.
You know, my organization doesn't work with folks long term, as you know, Doorways would. But I have an interesting case because the family that we helped never thought that they would be in a position to need help. Together they were making, I think, close to $80,000, and they were doing fine. And they were forced out of their apartment due to a fire down the hall.
Oh my.
And so even at that point, when some of the families got assistance, they weren't eligible for assistance because they were, you know, they were doing financially well. Well, they stayed in a hotel. The hotel costs continued. They have an infant child. You know, how do you feed an infant child in a hotel? They expected to go back to the apartment. They eventually gave up on being able to go back to the apartment, even though their apartment wasn't damaged. By the time they found another apartment, which they were happy with, they had to put up 2 months security deposit plus the first month's rent. So we're talking, you know, $6,000.
Wow.
They just didn't have it.
Of course not. Yeah.
And so they were kind of in a no man's land where they could pay night to night in the hotel and get by, but never be able to get into an apartment. So we helped them. They were able to come up with about 2/3 of that expense, and we paid the rest just to get them into the apartment.
Right.
Then they'll be fine. And, you know, I believe that they're doing fine now. But it was interesting to talk to the mother, how she felt that she couldn't believe that they could ever be in a situation like that, and they were grateful for the help they got in this community.
Often the people who have the least means need to pay the most short term, you know, to stay in the hotel. You have to pay the most because you don't have enough money to afford the security deposit on a place.
That's right.
Yeah. So by spending some money in the short term, you're saving tons of money over the course of the years to come.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you, Jerry and Caroline.
Well, I've shared a bit about one of our survivors that came to the Safe House, but I'm thinking of a family that came to our family shelter that was homeless, because we also serve intact couples at our family shelter. And this family really struck me because they were living in overcrowded conditions, and the family of 5 was sharing 1 bedroom and a 2-bedroom apartment with another family. And the apartment was not well kept, and sadly their 3 young children were exposed to lead paint. And we were called by actually the pediatrician because they were concerned that the kids were showing positive for lead poisoning. Oh, no. And this family was in the father had been laid off from some seasonal work, and they just were they had an eviction notice in hand. They were just in such a state of crisis. And they called and were referred by a social worker at the county. And when we were on the phone with them, letting them know we had space and of course they could come in, the mom said to us, well, there must be another family who needs it more than we do.
Oh my goodness.
And there's, you know, I think if anything we can do is these are folks who are such survivors, and they're not looking for handouts. You know, this safety net is so necessary because really very real things happen to people, and it can set them back. And as Jerry said, you know, it can just cascade backwards from there. And that intervention or prevention, wherever we stand along that continuum, is just so vital to turn lives around. And when I flash forward and I look at where they are today and how hard they worked and the challenges that they overcame, all of their kids are getting early intervention services. One of them did have autism, so he's getting the help he needs so that he can develop to his full potential.
Right.
And the father is working a year-round job, and they're living in an apartment of their own that's safe and healthy.
Wonderful.
And with our staff support to help them really not be in that situation again. And going to AFAC for groceries in the week, and
Sure.
and I'm sure we have called upon Jerry's shop for a prescription or two for their kids. So.
All right. Yeah, and that's really what
really
this
rewarding.
show, the reason I started this show is, like you said, helping people to reach their full potential, and to do that, all the needs need to be met.
And what's really humbling too is, as Charlie was saying, these are people who are in our lives, and in this community, we are so fortunate. We do have so much abundance, and we don't see it, but it is right there in front of us. And this is a family that was in school with my kids and lived just a few blocks from my home. And I didn't know that someone was needing that.
Yeah. And it's we've been talking about the the unemployed, the younger folks in our society, but a very large number of folks that AFAC serves are the elderly who have paid for their houses and are now retiring in place in Arlington County, where they've lived with their kids all of these years, and they don't have enough money to continue that life. So a lot of those folks are our clients, and we try to do two things with them: certainly provide the food, but also to provide food so that they can make better decisions about what they eat. Instead of going to the fast food joint and eating high salt, high sugar, and high fat food, we give them healthy, fresh vegetables. So there is, there are other groups in our community that need help besides just the unemployed.
And the elderly, especially those who've been living here forever, have made Arlington what it is.
That's
Exactly.
right.
And
Absolutely.
it would be really, really unconscionable to tell them they have to leave now.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, we are going to have to leave now because it's time to wrap up the show. But I've really appreciated having you on the show. And this is Nathan Bynum, and thank you so much for watching this episode of Meeting Our Needs. Please check out the websites for Arlington Food Assistance Center, Doorways for Women and Families, and Arlington Thrive. See how you can get involved and meet your own need for community and contribution. Thanks for watching.